Watching Good Morning Britain. Let's have a look at the front pages, shall we? The Daily Mail says Boris Johnson has 1 foot in number 10 after his sweeping success in the first round of the Tory leadership contest. It reports rivals are now scrambling to sabotage just basically some kind of coronation.
The Times says the former Foreign Secretary is being accused of hiding from TV debates, as other candidates have already agreed to take part.
And the Daily Telegraph reports that Mr Johnson's supporters are urging his rivals with the least votes to quit to speed up the selection process, calling them vanity candidates.
Mr Johnson in the Telegraph.
Mr Johnson in the Telegraph. I love that.
Very formal for
I
their
love that.
columnist.
Very formal. We've got broadcaster and commentator Iain Dale and former Labour advisor Ayesha Hazarika here too. And another front page, the Daily Express has got the question, really, hasn't it? Who can stop Boris now? Is there anyone?
Well, there are 7 left, so I suppose 6 of them could, in theory. Look, the conventional wisdom is it's going to be Jeremy Hunt or Michael Gove in the final, but Sajid Javid is... Apparently,
was on your show last night.
He was. Andrea Leadsom is thinking of backing him, we hear, and Matt Hancock. Now, if that happens, that transforms his chances. Now, that's not to say that all of their supporters would naturally follow, but quite a few of them may well do. So maybe he's coming up on the rails.
Matt Hancock's still in the race. He's still... I mean, is there a question with
hanging on by his fingertips,
But he's still through. He got through the first vote. If he... I mean, feasibly, if he does pull out early before the next vote, would that suggest, as some of the newspapers are thinking, that there is a plot to try and stop Boris getting the role?
It's not a plot. I don't think it's a plot. I mean, if you're in a race, you're in it to win it.
So
you want to stop Boris.
But if you gang together and decide who would be the best opposition to Boris, that's kind of a plot, isn't it?
Well, that's politics, isn't it?
Yes, well, quite. But
Ayesha, do you think he can be stopped?
No, I don't think he can be stopped. I think he is his big blonde juggernaut heading towards, like a big blonde blunderbuss heading towards number 10. And, you know, I think he will be very, very tough to beat, mainly because... And actually, I predicted that Boris Johnson would be leading the Conservative Party a long time ago, not because I'm sort of like Paul the Octopus in terms of my mystic powers, but when you're out on the doorstep, I think you do see this polarisation of politics. A lot of people have said, look, the Labour Party is now back to its true socialist red roots. A lot of doors I knocked on in Conservative marginal Labour seats, they were saying, we want a true blue Conservative. We want somebody like Boris Johnson. We want a contest at the next general election, Boris Johnson versus Jeremy Corbyn. Now, that's not the sort of politics that I particularly like myself, but I think there is a bit of a thirst out there for, I think, clear lines in politics. I think for quite a long time people felt, perhaps with kind of my generation of politics, that everything was a bit too the same, you couldn't really tell the difference. People are kind of thirsting for almost an Americanisation of politics. Now, I think, for me, I find that quite sort of troubling, because I think politics is very, very polarised. There's a lot of people in the middle. Absolutely, but I think we are going to enter that period of politics. And I am worried about Boris Johnson, because I do think he could be our very own version of Donald Trump, which is quite worrying.
All those comparisons have been made a lot this week. And, Iain, you've been doing leadership interviews on your show, on your radio show on ABC, with every single one of them has come in other than Boris Johnson. He's still being told, he's still being taunted for hiding. It certainly feels like, I mean, he's done his press conference and he took 6 questions, very controlled questions. It certainly feels like somebody has said, right, Boris, this is yours to lose now. How about we keep the powder dry? You don't need to do these debates. Let's get you elected before you say something that could get you unelected.
And you've got to understand that. I think if we were all Boris Johnson's media advisors, we would be giving him exactly the same advice, wouldn't
he? Get a big gag and putting it like a big plus.
Because any interview that you do, particularly broadcast interviews, they can go horribly wrong. And leadership campaigns are often about one single moment that changes the weather. David Cameron, I mean, I remember I was David Davis's chief of staff at the time. He was streets ahead of everybody else. Everyone assumed he would be the next leader. Cameron makes a speech at the Tory party conference without notes. I mean, Anne Widdecombe had been doing it for years, but everyone said, oh, that's so innovative. And David Davis didn't give a particularly brilliant speech, and it changed the political weather. So what the other candidates have got to think of, who can have that one moment that could change the political weather?
Do we want a Prime Minister, because this person's going to end up being the Prime Minister, do we want a Prime Minister, Ayesha, that has to be gagged by his press team so he doesn't throw away the chance to be leader because he is capable of saying something outrageous that would get him elected.
We don't. I think there's a lot of people who feel really disconnected from politics right now. I mean, the irony of where we are now is this is all because of Brexit. Brexit was a whole thing about taking back control. A lot of people in the country think, hang on a minute, this guy is going to be pretty much, there's going to be a coronation for this guy. Less than 200,000 people in the Conservative Party get to choose who the next leader is, and we don't even see him doing, TV debates or doing a lot of media. And the other thing is, hang on a minute, the other thing is, in politics recently, and I say this as a Labour person, the big lesson is to get coronated by your party without a mandate for the public doesn't go so well. It didn't go well for Gordon Brown, certainly didn't go well for Theresa May, and I think Boris Johnson will have to go to the public and get some kind of mandate quite quickly when he becomes
this
Prime
argument
Minister.
comes out. I doubt whether you would have said a single word of that back in 2007 when you were working for Gordon Brown.
I did. We thought he should have had that election, which he bottled, and he should have
Yeah,
had
but
it.
when he was crowned the leader after Tony Blair, there wasn't even a contest then.
There are
And that
several
wasn't
stages,
right, and that
though,
didn't go
aren't
so
there?
well. That didn't
Did
go
you
well.
say that at the time?
Yeah, we sort of said that there should have been a contest.
Did you say it publicly? I mean, was that the sort of thing, or was it a discussion that was had?
Well, do you know,
saying we need
I
to-
have been
think, do you
garroted
know
by
what?
Gordon Brown
I
if
think
they'd
that
done that.
actually one of the big problems in politics recently is that there's lots of people that haven't come through as street fighters. They've been given and anointed their positions, and I don't think that works well in politics. Politics is about fighting for the public vote, and if you can't even have a proper fight within your own party, it doesn't bode that well for the public.
So, look, talking of people that are coming through, Rory Stewart, although he was the lowest of the ones that came through, is still in there.
It feels like he's
a
street
poll
fighting,
of
doesn't it?
the
Scrapping away.
Yes, and this was a ballot of MPs. A poll of his party actually puts him second to Boris Johnson. Could he be the difference, the newness?
No.
No. Okay.
Because he's not, actually. When you look
He's on our programme a little bit
I mean,
later.
what he's saying, in some ways, is quite interesting, but his platform on Europe just falls apart when you examine it, because what he's saying is that he wants Theresa May's deal to go through. That deal is dead as a dodo. It's not coming back. And he's got no original ideas on Europe apart from taking Theresa May's deal
But
through.
he has had a fantastic cut through, and I've been quite surprised in a crowded field, right? So I
He's
have
had a great campaign, you're right.
I have a whole group of mum friends, right? They're not massively political. They're very, very lefty. They are in love with Rory Stewart. He's like a wee Paddington bear shambling around the country doing his little videos. Everyone's like, oh, bless him. And also, it's so refreshing to hear somebody from the Conservative Party say a no-deal Brexit would be disastrous for this country.
He's every Guardian reader's favourite Tory.
Well, look,
that tells you all you need
There
to
may
know.
be some people watching this morning that aren't as gripped by the politics but are by Love Island. So what we've managed to do is we've managed to couple the two things together.
Oh, my God.
The leadership contest in a Love Island style. So you get an idea of who the runners and riders are. Here you go.
Previously on Leadership Love Island.
I will take us through this time of crisis.
I'm the Brexiteer that you can rely on.
You can only do that job if you know your heart.
There were 10 hopefuls, but after 3 dumpings, only 7 remain. Tonight, who will couple up with who to survive the next round? Ready to lead. All eyes are on Boris, who's been grafting behind the scenes.
Kick the can again, and we kick the bucket.
But just because he's got a new haircut, he's not everyone's type on paper.
Boris Johnson is yesterday's news.
It's all to play for, with the boys eager to crack on. Looks like someone's got a text. So who's going to get pied off next? And who will walk away with the keys to the number 10 villa?
So there you go. A little
Love that. Jazz it up a bit.
the Love
I
Island.
did actually tweet last night that Love Island last night was more exciting than the Tory party leadership contest.
You weren't listening to my interview with Sajid Javid.
Exactly what I
There's
did.
no front runner.
Shots fired.
There's no front
Goodness
runner in
me.
Love Island. You found an interesting article in one of the newspapers
Well,
today.
I have. Have you
Because
ever...
there are no women, are there?
No, not now. There were 2. But have you ever imagined, Ben, any of these male candidates, what they'd look like if they were women?
I haven't.
You need to... I mean, in one of those quiet moments...
of which there are many.
Someone's done it for you.
Really. You need to... I'm feeling like Richard Arnold now. You need to imagine no longer, because The Sun have got this.
Can you
Wow.
zoom in on any
In
of
a
those?
very helpful way.
Yeah, hold it still
Now,
there.
Ben, looking at all
Actually,
these,
Boris makes
this
a
bevy
rather
of
lovely
beauties,
woman.
which of these would you fancy
I got a little something for
a
Jemima
little
Hunt.
jiggy with?
Jemima.
Jemima Hunt.
She's got lovely eyes.
Wow.
Sort of. What's that?
I would say
Michaela Gove.
Michaela Gove?
I think
the lips are a bit
Boris
strong.
looks like Vicky Pollard.
Actually, do you know what?
But are you
That's
bothered?
really
Are you
worrying.
bothered?
Yeah, but no, but yeah,
We
but
need,
yeah,
we
but-
need to kind of do a comparison,
The
don't
thing
we?
is,
Vicky
you know,
Pollard?
Aisha, you know things are bad when they're starting to mock up the many candidates as women because there's this procession. It seems like that's it.
Well, I know. I mean, sadly, I would have liked to see a couple of women get through, but the big lesson from this leadership contest is do not mess with Lorraine Kelly.
Essentially, absolutely.
In fact, I think there's quite a lot of people that would like to see Lorraine Kelly enter the thing, and she could be the only person to stop Boris Johnson.
It has
Is that the
been
answer
said
to the
before.
Daily Express question? Who can stop Boris?
I think
Lorraine
Lorraine Kelly is the answer to most problems right now in
Well,
Britain.
you're not wrong there. You're not wrong there. Putting your other hat on, your comedian and comedy writing hat on, Jo Brand has also caused a lot of fuss this week, and we now know that she's been investigated for something she said on a radio programme, which was a joke she made about what we've seen, you know, milkshake being thrown on people like Nigel Farage and other people, and saying, why bother with milkshake when you can get battery acid? And people have said that in a time when MPs are feeling very vulnerable, that was a step too far for
Nigel
her
Farage as well. Nigel
and
Farage
for the
tweeted
BBC.
about incitement
Yes.
by sending that. And she made it really clear it was a comedy show. She said, this is just my fantasy. We know that she's a comedian. Have you ever done...
Where's the
have you ever seen-
line, do you think?
It's very hard. I've been really mulling this over. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jo Brand. I've worked with her a number of times. And also I do, you know, I've done these comedy panel shows like Have I Got News for You and the News Quiz and things like that. And look, you're under a lot of pressure to come up with something to make sort of people laugh, and comedians are not meant
And
to be
also,
like
guess,
politicians.
make people a little bit shocked in a
Yeah,
way.
well,
It's kind
absolutely.
of part of it, isn't
However,
it?
I have really mulled long and hard about this, and I do think I was quite uncomfortable when I heard it, only because MPs are under so much threat right now. And I actually know a female MP who has been threatened with an acid attack, right?
you?
Yeah.
Who
So
is it?
I
Can we
can't.
say?
No, I can't actually say who it is for security sort of reasons. So I do think that there is. It does feel like there's kind of quite an air of menace. You know, look, we had an MP killed. We had an MP. There was a horrible plot to kill another sort of MP. I just think the blood is really up in this country. We talked about it before, just about how divisive. And also, you know, I came down like a ton of bricks on Danny Baker for that tweet that sort of he did. And I think if you are a person who is lucky enough to get to go onto these shows and have a bit of a platform, you just have to think
But
a
Aisha,
wee
you
bit.
know that this was pre-recorded, and you know that the head of
Yes.
comedy and the head of Radio 4 have decided, they listened to it before it went
Yeah.
out, and they made the decision that this was a joke that was perfectly acceptable to go out on the Radio 4 show. Had Nigel Farage not tweeted about it, would we be talking about it now? And whether that makes
in
it...
true BBC fashion, I'm sure deputy heads will roll on this, because look, it was a... She probably shouldn't have said it, but are we seriously suggesting that this warrants a police investigation?
Yeah, I think
Clearly,
that is like-
she's not. She wasn't saying to people, "Go and do this." The very next sentence was, "Well, of course, I wouldn't do this, but
It's my fantasy.
It's a joke.
And Jo Brand, throughout her career, has always been there to shock in some ways. And I agree with Aisha. I'm a huge fan of hers. I think she is really funny. And she shouldn't have said it, but I mean, this is really a
Do
story
you
in a
think
teacup.
everything changed with the death of Joe Cox? Because
Yes,
I think
yes,
we
it
would
did.
have thought this was utter nonsense
Yeah.
in
Yes.
any way
Absolutely.
criticising Joe Brand before that. And since that, everybody does feel
but
more concerned.
If you speak to most female MPs, they have had death threats, rape threats. I mean, there was somebody joking about raping Jess Phillips, like, quite recently, which caused, rightly, like, a lot of controversy. I just think we're in a completely different climate. But as somebody who is a comedian as well as a commentator and has worked in politics, you do not want a situation where you're sort of policing, you know, comedy and all. You've got to be very, very careful about the line. And somebody like Jo Brand is obviously different from somebody who's seeking public office or something. But I just think all of us, right, have a responsibility, whether we're tweeting, whether we have any sort of public platform, just think a wee bit, because we are in quite kind of weird, angry, raw times. And let's be honest, it would be horrifying, but I don't think it would be surprising if there was another attack on MPs. MPs have to live with CCTV in their houses. I know an MP friend who has had trouble when she's been picking her kids up from school. MPs, particularly female MPs, and actually lots of male MPs, are kind of living with like a lot of like heavy duty security on them, and so I think we all want a better politics.
How does that lift? How do we get past this, Ian? Is it once Brexit's done and everybody's got something that they can say, right, whatever happens, we are going to have to deal with the future? Is it October the 31st?
There is no one thing. I think it's about how we all conduct ourselves on social media, or wherever we are, and it's very easy to say to people, just sort of ratchet the temperature down a little bit. But social media is all about spontaneity, and if someone calls you a whatever, you're going to call them a whatever. That's kind of
and
how it
shocking
is.
thing, you know, you get more reward on social media for saying something absolutely, you know, outrageous and.
That's why you've got so few followers.
And that's why we've got so many.
Undoubtedly, it is.
Stop trolling me.
It is Father's Day on Sunday. We've been getting some fantastic dad jokes. We've been celebrating.
These have been brilliant.
We've got some great ones. We'll let you have a moment to think about your dad jokes if you've got some.
Do you want to hear some of these? Neil on Twitter says, "Why didn't the owl go to see his girlfriend when it was raining? Because it was too wet to woo."
I like this
Ian,
one as well.
That was a good one.
Today my son asked, "Can I have my bookmark?" And I burst into tears. 11 years old, and he still doesn't know my name is Brian. I think that's funny.
That's a dad gag.
Dave, I've got to read this one out. Did you hear about the chef who got some herbs in his eyes? Now he's partially sighted.
Oh, I shared that gag.
Do you ever dad? My favourite story about my dad is my dad recently was quite ill actually, and I was like, "Oh, should I drop everything and come see?" And he was like, "No, you don't have a pension. You need to get every bit." It's like,
unfortunately, that's not so much of a joke, is it?
That's real. Ian.
Well, we've just been talking about inappropriate jokes, haven't we?
Yes.
So I'm
wanna
going
think about
to
this
give
one
you the
first?
first line of this, but I can't give you the punchline, unfortunately, so you have to make it up yourself.
Oh, dear.
Right.
Why did the pervert cross the road?
OK, yes, we'll definitely leave
And
that right
here's
there.
the weather.
You don't want to leave that in my
answer to that.
head, Ian. That's a bad place to leave it. Laura, save us. She's at Stamford.